People often ask if I saw the signs. If I noticed the late nights. The secret of phone calls. The sudden change in the way my husband looked at me. The truth? Yes. I noticed all of it. I just kept convincing myself that love was stronger than suspicion. I wanted to believe that marriages survived difficult seasons. That stress could explain distance. That exhaustion could explain silence. I was wrong. Sometimes, distance isn't caused by work. It's caused by someone walking toward another life while pretending they're still standing beside you. My name is Claire. When this story began, I was 32 years old. My husband, Daniel, and I had been married for 7 years. We weren't rich. We weren't glamorous. But we were happy. Or at least, I thought we were. We met in college. He was studying marketing. I was studying graphic design. Our first apartment was barely big enough for 2 people. The kitchen was so tiny that if one person opened the refrigerator, the other had to step into the hallway. We laughed about it. We made frozen pizza feel like a celebration. Every Friday night, we'd sit on the floor with cheap takeout because we couldn't afford a dining table. Back then, life wasn't perfect, but it felt honest. Daniel used to tell me one day, "We'll have a house with a big porch. And a golden retriever. And you'll have the art studio you've always wanted." I believed every word. Not because he promised it. Because I believed in him. For years, we built our life together. I freelanced as a designer. Daniel climbed the corporate ladder. Slowly, things improved. We bought a modest home. We adopted a rescue dog named Charlie. We even started saving for a family. Life finally felt stable. Then, everything changed. Daniel received a promotion. His new department reported directly to the company's regional vice president. Her name was Victoria Lawson. She was successful, elegant, confident. The kind of woman who walked into a room and immediately became the center of attention. She drove luxury cars, owned a penthouse overlooking the city, vacationed in places I'd only seen in magazines. People admired her. Some feared her. Daniel couldn't stop talking about her. "Victoria says I have executive potential. Victoria thinks I should travel with the leadership team. Victoria invited us to another corporate dinner." At first, I was proud of him. Then, her name started appearing in every conversation. One evening, I asked casually, "So, what's she like?" Daniel smiled. "She's brilliant." There was nothing wrong with that answer. But something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. The business trips became more frequent. 3 days. 5 days. A full week. Whenever he returned, he brought expensive gifts. Perfume. Jewelry. Designer handbags. Far beyond what we could normally afford. When I asked about them, he'd smile. Big bonus. I never questioned it. Looking back, I should have. The first crack appeared on our 7th wedding anniversary. We had reservations at our favorite Italian restaurant. The same place where Daniel proposed. I wore the blue dress he once said made my eyes sparkle. Charlie wagged his tail as I left the house. I remember feeling excited. 7 years. We'd made it. Then my phone rang. "Daniel. I'm so sorry. Emergency meeting. I can't make it." I looked around the restaurant. Couples were laughing. A violinist played softly in the corner. I quietly told the waiter I wouldn't be needing the second menu. I ate alone. I told myself there would be other anniversaries. The next morning, I found the restaurant receipt in my purse. I almost threw it away. Instead, I tucked it into a drawer. I don't know why. Maybe part of me already knew. It would become evidence of the day everything started falling apart. Weeks later, Daniel forgot to take his phone when he went to shower. It buzzed on the kitchen counter. I wasn't trying to snoop. I simply glanced at the screen. One message. From Victoria. Last night was wonderful. I can't stop smiling. I stared at those words. For several seconds. My mind refused to understand them. Maybe they had attended a company event. Maybe I was misunderstanding. Maybe. Sometimes denial is louder than truth. Daniel walked into the kitchen drying his hair. He saw the phone in my hand. His expression changed instantly. Why are you looking at my messages? I looked up slowly. What happened last night? Silence. Then, instead of answering, he sighed, as though I had become the inconvenience. We need to talk. Those 4 words. The sentence every spouse fears. We sat across from each other in the living room. Charlie rested his head on my lap, sensing something was wrong. Daniel wouldn't look at me. Finally, he spoke. I didn't mean for it to happen. My heart sank. I've fallen in love with someone else. The room became impossibly quiet. I searched his face for any sign that this was a nightmare. There wasn't one. Victoria. He nodded. I couldn't even cry. Not yet. I simply whispered, since when? He looked away. A few months. While we still shared breakfast. While we planned vacations. While we talked about having children. He had already left our marriage in his heart. I finally asked the question I dreaded. Do you want a divorce? He answered without hesitation. Yes. 1 word. 7 years. Reduced to 1 word. What about us? There isn't an us anymore. His voice wasn't angry. That almost made it worse. He sounded relieved. Then he said something I'll never forget. Victoria can give me a life you never could. The sentence landed like a punch to my chest. Not because of the money. Because of what it implied. That I had been measured. Compared. Found lacking. I looked around our home. The walls we painted together. The photos from road trips. The Christmas ornaments we'd collected every year. Was all of it meaningless? Or had it only been meaningful to me? Daniel stood. I'm moving into Victoria's place. Tonight. He had already packed. Already planned everything. This conversation wasn't the beginning. It was simply the announcement. He walked upstairs. I heard closet doors opening. Suitcases rolling across the floor. Drawers closing. The sounds echoed through the house like tiny explosions. Charlie sat beside me, refusing to move. Every few minutes, he'd look toward the stairs. Waiting. Not understanding why his favorite person was leaving. Neither did I. Daniel carried the last suitcase to the front door. For a moment, he hesitated. I hope someday you'll understand. I finally found my voice. No. He frowned. I won't. Because love doesn't leave in secret. It doesn't replace promises with excuses. It doesn't compare people by the size of their bank accounts. His shoulders dropped. I never wanted to hurt you. A bitter smile crossed my face. And yet, you did. Without another word. He opened the front door. Charlie tried to follow him. Daniel gently pushed him back inside. Then, the door closed. The sound echoed through the empty house. It was the loudest silence I'd ever heard. That night, I sat on the living room floor. Exactly where we'd once eaten frozen pizza and dreamed about the future. Only this time, there was no laughter. No dreams. Just me. Charlie curled up beside me. His warm head rested against my arm. I wrapped my arms around him and finally allowed myself to cry. Not because I had lost a husband, but because I had lost the future I believed we were building together. Over the next few days, friends called. Family visited. Everyone said the same thing. You're strong. You'll get through this. It wasn't your fault. I appreciated their kindness. But none of those words filled the empty side of the bed. None of them erased the memories. None of them explained why the man who once promised forever had walked away without looking back. A week later, the divorce papers arrived. So did the final surprise. Daniel wasn't asking for anything. He was leaving me the house. At first, I thought it was generosity. I didn't yet realize. The house carried a secret that would change the course of my life. A secret Daniel himself didn't know. And 3 years later, it would become the reason he stood on my doorstep, begging for a second chance. People think heartbreak happens all at once. It doesn't. The worst part isn't the day someone leaves. It's the hundreds of ordinary days that follow. The first morning you wake up alone. The first grocery trip where you automatically reach for their favorite cereal. The first birthday. The first Christmas. The first time you hear your favorite song and realize it no longer feels the same. Healing isn't one decision. It's thousands of tiny ones. The first few weeks after Daniel left felt like survival. I barely ate. I barely slept. Charlie never left my side. Every night he'd curl up beside the couch, as if he knew I wasn't ready to sleep in our bedroom. Sometimes I'd wake up thinking I heard Daniel unlocking the front door. Then I'd remember. He wasn't coming home. One rainy afternoon, I decided to clean the house. Not because I wanted to. Because if I sat still another day, I thought I might drown in my own thoughts. I packed away wedding photos, folded old sweaters, opened drawers I'd ignored for years. When I reached Daniel's home office, I almost turned around. Instead, I opened the filing cabinet. Most folders contained ordinary paperwork. Insurance, mortgage documents, tax returns. Then I noticed a thick envelope labeled, Property Survey, Do Not Discard. Curious, I opened it. Inside were old blueprints for our house. Tucked between them was a letter from the previous owner. It explained something I had never known. The detached garage behind the house had once been a professional woodworking workshop. The space was fully wired for commercial equipment. The permits were still valid. I stared at the papers for a long time. A workshop. An empty building. An opportunity. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the divorce. Curiosity. The next morning I walked into the garage. Dust covered everything. Old shelves leaned against the walls. Spider webs stretched across broken windows. But beneath all that neglect, the building had good bones. It reminded me of myself. Broken on the surface, still standing underneath. I had spent years working as a freelance graphic designer. Clients always asked if I could design packaging, branding, and promotional displays. I usually turned those projects down because I had nowhere to produce them. Now, maybe I did. I emptied my savings account, bought second-hand equipment, watched tutorials late into the night, made mistakes, ruined expensive materials, started over, again, and again. For months, business barely existed. Some weeks I earned less than $100. Other weeks, nothing. More than once I questioned whether Daniel had been right. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I simply wasn't capable of building something bigger. Whenever those thoughts appeared, I'd look at Charlie sleeping near my workbench. Then I'd hear my father's old voice. Money doesn't grow on trees. Or Daniel's voice. Victoria can give me a life you never could. Instead of breaking me. Those memories fueled me. One afternoon, a local coffee shop owner walked into my workshop. "I heard you make custom displays." "I do." She smiled. "I need help redesigning my entire store." It was the biggest order I'd ever received. I worked 16-hour days. When she reopened her cafe, customers loved it. She recommended me to another business. Then another. Then another. Within a year, I hired my first employee. 6 months later, my second. By the end of the second year, we had outgrown the garage completely. I rented a small warehouse on the edge of town. Our company specialized in handcrafted commercial interiors, branding displays, and custom furniture for local businesses. Nothing glamorous. Just honest work. The kind of work I loved. For the first time in my life, success didn't feel like proving someone wrong. It felt like discovering who I really was. Then came the newspaper article. Local entrepreneur revitalizes small businesses through creative design. A reporter interviewed me inside my workshop. They asked about my journey. I never mentioned Daniel. Never mentioned Victoria. I simply said, sometimes life pushes you toward the version of yourself you were always meant to become. The article spread quickly. New clients arrived almost every week. One Saturday morning, I was planting flowers in the front yard when my neighbor, Mrs. Bennett, walked over holding her phone. "Honey, you remember your ex-husband?" I smiled politely. "I try not to." She hesitated. "I think you should see this." She handed me the phone. A business magazine headline filled the screen. Major corporation announces executive restructuring after financial scandal. There was Daniel's picture. And beside it, Victoria's. According to the article, several risky acquisitions had nearly destroyed the company. Victoria resigned. Daniel lost his executive position. The article didn't mention what happened afterward. I handed the phone back. "Thank you." Mrs. Bennett studied my face. "Are you okay?" I looked toward my workshop where my employees were unloading materials for Monday's project. Then I smiled. "I think I finally am." Months passed. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Work. Friends. Family dinners with my sister. Long walks with Charlie. I wasn't searching for another relationship. Not because I hated love. Because I had finally learned to enjoy my own company. Then, exactly 3 years after Daniel left, everything changed. It was a cold Thursday evening. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Charlie suddenly lifted his head. Then barked. Someone was outside. I glanced at the clock. Almost 9. I wasn't expecting anyone. The doorbell rang. Once. Then again. I opened the front door. For a second, I didn't recognize the man standing there. His expensive tailored suits were gone. His confident posture had disappeared. His hair had begun turning gray. His eyes looked tired. Older. Then he spoke. "Hi, Claire." "Daniel." 3 years had changed both of us. Just not in the same way. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally I asked, "What are you doing here?" He looked down at his shoes. "I know I don't deserve this. But could we talk?" Charlie stood beside me. He stared at Daniel for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he slowly walked forward. Daniel knelt down. Tears immediately filled his eyes as Charlie wagged his tail. I missed you too, buddy. Something about that moment hurt more than I expected. Dogs don't remember betrayal. They remember love. Humans aren't always that lucky. I folded my arms. You have 5 minutes. Daniel nodded. That's more than I deserve. He stepped inside. The house looked completely different now. New furniture. Fresh paint. Photos from company events. Awards on the shelves. Evidence of a life rebuilt. He looked around quietly. You've done well. I worked hard. I can see that. His voice carried something unfamiliar. Not pride. Not jealousy. Regret. Deep regret. Finally, he looked directly at me. The company collapsed. I lost everything. Victoria left. I remained silent. He continued. I thought money meant security. I thought success meant happiness. I was wrong. I simply asked, why are you really here, Daniel? He hesitated, then quietly answered, because I need to tell you something. I stared at him. He swallowed hard. It isn't about me. It's about you. My heart tightened. What do you mean? He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a worn manila envelope, and placed it gently on the coffee table. You were never supposed to find out this way. I looked at the envelope, then back at him. What is it? His voice barely rose above a whisper. His expensive tailored suits were gone. His confident posture had disappeared. His hair had begun turning gray. His eyes looked tired. Older. Then he spoke. Hi, Claire. Daniel. 3 years had changed both of us. Just not in the same way. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally I asked, what are you doing here? He looked down at his shoes. I know I don't deserve this. But could we talk? Charlie stood beside me. He stared at Daniel for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he slowly walked forward. Daniel knelt down. Tears immediately filled his eyes as Charlie wagged his tail. I missed you too, buddy. Something about that moment hurt more than I expected. Dogs don't remember betrayal. They remember love. Humans aren't always that lucky. I folded my arms. You have 5 minutes. Daniel nodded. That's more than I deserve. He stepped inside. The house looked completely different now. New furniture. Fresh paint. Photos from company events. Awards on the shelves. Evidence of a life rebuilt. He looked around quietly. You've done well. I worked hard. I can see that. His voice carried something unfamiliar. Not pride. Not jealousy. Regret. Deep regret. Finally, he looked directly at me. The company collapsed. I lost everything. Victoria left. I remained silent. He continued. I thought money meant security. I thought success meant happiness. I was wrong. I simply asked, why are you really here, Daniel? He hesitated, then quietly answered, because I need to tell you something. I stared at him. He swallowed hard. It isn't about me. It's about you. My heart tightened. What do you mean? He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a worn manila envelope, and placed it gently on the coffee table. You were never supposed to find out this way. I looked at the envelope, then back at him. What is it? His voice barely rose above a whisper. I stared at the manila envelope on my coffee table. The room felt strangely quiet. Charlie had settled back onto his bed, as if he sensed something important was about to happen. Daniel looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally, like someone who had spent years carrying a weight that had finally become too heavy. I folded my arms. You have exactly one chance to explain. He nodded. I know. Then he slid the envelope toward me. Inside were photocopies of emails, company documents, performance reports, and one signed agreement. I frowned. What am I looking at? Daniel took a slow breath. Victoria didn't just become my boss. She became obsessed with controlling every part of my career. I looked at him without speaking. He continued. She knew about you. She knew how much I loved you. I couldn't hide my skepticism. You expect me to believe that? No. I expect you to read. The first email was dated almost 4 years earlier. From Victoria. Dinner tonight? Just the two of us. We should discuss your future. Daniel had replied politely, saying he preferred to keep meetings during office hours. A week later. Another email. Another invitation. Then another. Eventually. The tone changed. One message read, "People who refuse opportunities don't usually move up in this company." I looked up. Daniel nodded slowly. It started as pressure. Then manipulation. Another document showed that Daniel had been offered a major promotion. There was one handwritten condition attached to the proposal. Executive leadership requires complete lifestyle alignment. I frowned. What does that even mean? Daniel laughed bitterly. It meant Victoria believed executives should marry people who fit her image. My stomach tightened. She told me you made me look ordinary. Those words hurt. Even after 3 years. Daniel looked at me with tears in his eyes. I argued with her. I defended you. But she kept reminding me what I could gain. The promotion. The salary. The stock options. The penthouse. The connections. Everything I'd once believed had simply happened naturally. Had been carefully orchestrated. I closed the folder. So why didn't you tell me? Daniel stared at the floor. Because I was ashamed. I wanted that life. I wanted the success. I convinced myself I could have both. He smiled sadly. I couldn't. He continued quietly. The affair. It did happen. So I won't pretend I was innocent. I made that choice. I crossed that line. I betrayed you. He looked directly into my eyes. That part was completely my fault. I appreciated the honesty. No excuses. No blame shifting. Just responsibility. But the day I left, I wasn't chasing love anymore. I frowned. What do you mean? He sighed. I already knew I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I blinked. What? I realized it weeks before I walked out. Then why leave? Because I was too proud to admit I'd destroyed everything. He laughed softly. Do you remember our anniversary? The restaurant. The empty chair. The untouched second menu. I nodded. I wasn't in an emergency meeting. I was sitting in Victoria's penthouse. Neither of us spoke. I spent the entire evening thinking about you. He looked around my living room. I should have been celebrating with my wife. Instead, I was chasing someone else's definition of success. I hated myself. He whispered. But instead of fixing my mistake, I doubled down. I kept going. Because admitting I was wrong would have meant admitting I'd thrown away the best thing I'd ever had. I remained silent. Some truths don't need immediate responses. They need room to breathe. Daniel reached into his pocket again. This time, he placed a small velvet box on the coffee table. I immediately recognized it. My wedding ring. I found it after moving out. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. He gently pushed it toward me. It always belonged to you. I didn't open the box. Some chapters deserve to stay closed. He stood. I didn't come here expecting another chance. I came because you deserved the truth. I stole that from you 3 years ago. I didn't want to steal it forever. I walked him to the front door. Before he stepped outside, he turned around. I have one question. I nodded. Are you happy? I smiled. For the first time. The answer came easily. Yes. Not because life was perfect. Not because the past had disappeared. But because I no longer measured my happiness by someone else's choices. Daniel nodded. I'm glad. He started walking toward his car. Then stopped. Without turning around, he said quietly, I'm sorry I didn't realize your worth until I'd already lost you. Then he drove away. Weeks passed. Life returned to normal. Work kept growing. My team expanded from 2 employees to 8. We renovated our first historic building. Won a regional design award. Moved into a larger studio. Success no longer felt like revenge. It simply felt like purpose. One afternoon, while organizing old boxes in the attic, I found the receipt from our 7th wedding anniversary. The one I'd kept all those years. For a long time, I just stared at it. Then I smiled. Not because it no longer hurt. Because it no longer controlled me. I folded it carefully, walked outside, and dropped it into the recycling bin. Some memories don't need to be erased. They just don't need to be carried forever. A year later, our company hosted its annual appreciation dinner. Employees brought their families. Children laughed between the tables. Music played softly in the background. As I looked around the room, I realized something. This was the life I'd once imagined. Not the exact version. A better one. Built on honesty, friendship, hard work, and peace. Near the end of the evening, one of my youngest employees asked me, Can I ask you something? I laughed. Of course. How did you become so confident? I thought for a moment, then answered honestly. I wasn't always. I spent years trying to convince someone else that I was enough. And one day, I realized the only person I needed to convince was myself. That night, I walked Charlie through the neighborhood. He was older now. His gray muzzle reminded me that time changes everything. The streets were quiet, the stars bright. As we reached the park, I sat on a bench and watched him chase a tennis ball with the same enthusiasm he'd always had. Dogs have a remarkable gift. They don't dwell on yesterday. They don't worry about tomorrow. They simply love the people who show up. Maybe that's why they heal so many broken hearts. As we headed home, I looked back once. Not because I missed the past, but because I was grateful for it. If Daniel had never left, I might never have discovered my own strength. If my marriage had never ended, I might never have built the life standing in front of me. Sometimes, the ending you never wanted becomes the beginning you never imagined. If this story resonated with you, remember this. When someone chooses money, status, or ambition over loyalty, it says far more about their priorities than your value. Healing doesn't mean pretending the pain never happened. It means refusing to let that pain decide who you become. The greatest revenge isn't making someone regret losing you. It's building a life so full of purpose and peace that you no longer need them to. The end. Thank you.